welcome to Real Vision Live. I'm Maggie Lake here with Mish Schneider, the Director of Trading Education and Research at MarketGauge.com. Mish, thanks for being back. Great to see you.
So nice to be back again. Thank you, Maggie. Thank you, Brian, in the background.
That's right, the team that makes it happen. Mish,
Right.
a lot has happened since we were last on together. I think it was back in early September. One of the massive changes, inflation now has a 6.2% year over year in the last CPI reading. That surprised a lot of people. As a person with a deep background in commodities, and I know we talk a lot about them, and you've been, in that space for years. What do you make of this?
Well, first of all, one of the great things about talking to you all at Real Vision, and I have a history now with you guys since 2018, is starting in 2019, we started talking about inflation, starting with sugar and food. So it may be a big shock to a lot of people, but it certainly is no shock to us to find out that the inflation numbers are creeping up. But what is so interesting about it is that I don't even think that it's really done much yet. I think the real shocker is going to be what's going to happen as we get into 2022, because we can see the writing on the wall. The Fed, which everybody expects to put the big kibosh on any creeping up inflation, is not going to do anything. The bonds sheet actually, in terms of their buying, actually swelled. The statistic came out today, even though they're saying they're going to do a cutback in terms of their bond buying, I think like by 15 billion a month.
Yeah.
And, this talk of everybody recommending or at least forecasting that their rates are going to go up a couple of times in 2022. I don't think that's going to happen so quickly. I'm not saying it wouldn't happen, but for right now, I really believe that the Fed thinks for sure that this is transitory. They don't see this as a real problem. And they have some evidence of that. If they're looking at energy, even though the CPI numbers don't necessarily include energy or food, but if they're looking at energy, oil prices have come off a little bit, energy prices have come off a little bit. We could talk about whether or not that's going to stick in a moment. If you look at the dollar, it's rallied. Typically, people anticipate strong dollar means no inflation, and in inflationary times, dollar goes down. We're seeing that actually as the opposite. So that if I were a Fed member saying, I really don't want to do anything to upset the market too much, and we're talking about the market, also the economy, we'll do nothing because this whole inflation thing is going to go away. And that is probably the most dangerous thing of all.
So, Mish, what does this mean for some of the metals that you've been tracking? And I know a lot of people in our audience have been looking at. There's been so much frustration around gold because everyone waits for that breakout and then it doesn't happen. We have seen it up, I think it was 7 days yesterday. And so does it feel like we're finally seeing a turn for that? What's your expectation? And are there any other metals that you're looking at?
Well, okay. So first of all, in terms of gold and silver, yes, both of the metals are finally going up and they're both hitting into resistance. We can see that. Silver in particular went right up today to the 50-week moving average, which it hasn't been over in a long time. But what's key to me and what I've noticed now for quite some time is that what us old-time commodity traders look at is the ratio between silver and gold. And historically, when silver starts to outperform gold, and if you look back at charts from, let's say, 1979, that's really when you start to see the precious metals ripe for some sort of parabolic move. And that's what we're anticipating. We're long silver. We actually didn't buy the gold this time. And, you always wish you had more when things are going up, of course. But we were very happy with our silver position. We've been in it for a while. We actually took a little profit today against that resistance. Because even though the silver is outperforming the gold, we have seen now a situation where it's a buy weakness, sell strength environment for a lot of the commodities, not just silver and gold, but even some of these food commodities. And when that flips, when we start to see buyers into strength, that's really when I think things can get really interesting. So my tip to the audience would be that is wait when we get these gap ups in silver or gold, or we get a flat opening and then it goes up and volume starts to build up and we close near highs on strong volume, that's going to be the sea change. And I don't think the Fed's going to really worry about inflation until we do see gold and silver go ballistic. And then they'll say, wait a minute, we now have to do something. And that's why they've been so complacent.
Yeah. And we know, as frustrating it is for people, and people, by the way, very divided about this, aren't they, Mish? I mean, there are many, and certainly guests we've had on Real Vision who also agree with you that they think it's overdone. They don't think the Fed's going to raise as aggressively. They're going to stick with that idea that it's transitory. And there are others who are really concerned about what's going on. Wage inflation, of course, is a key component of that. So they're also going to be watching that, as well as the signals from the metal market that you just mentioned. But in this environment, even if the Fed thinks it's transitory, they made a point to say that's not really as much of a time issue as it is a permanent structural change. So we could be in this sort of pain situation with inflation for a while. Are you looking at foods? I know you do track the commodity area in food as well. And this is, I mean, anyone's gone to the grocery store can't believe some of the changes that we've seen and the rapid rise. Is there anything, has that move already happened? What are you seeing in terms of the price action in the agriculture space?
Well, look at DBA. I mean, DBA, my God, I've been talking about DBA for such a long time. I mean, I can remember back when people didn't want to buy DBA because they were worried about all kinds of tax structures or their 401s couldn't get in. I'm like, figure it out. And now here we are with actually today's action. I think last time I looked, it was trading at like 1964. DBA is now breaking out of multi-year highs right here and have a huge base it's been forming over the last year and a half. So if that tells you anything, that tells you that whatever pause we may be seeing in corn and soybeans and wheat is just a pause. We get any kind of weather issues, and they're already talking about La Nina coming into this winter, where the Southwest and the growing regions where I live could continue to have major drought, while some of the growing regions more in the northern states will have tremendous amount of flooding.
Yeah.
So, you know, we have Mother Nature, if she doesn't behave herself, which we know is very likely for many, many reasons, not even putting a blame on it, it's just the cycle of nature, that's only going to exacerbate the situation. And also, one of the things I talked about with y'all a while ago is the hoarding mentality that happens when people get nervous about food. And I know that when I go, well, I don't necessarily do this, but I know people who have families to feed, in particular, big families, are already doing that because they're worried. They're worried about rising prices, and they're worrying about the shelves getting emptied out. So yeah, big concern. And I don't even think we've seen the tip of that iceberg yet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you made a really, really important point there. It's not just they want to get ahead of price increases. They're also worried about scarcity. They're just worried about it not being there. So you combine both of those, and even people who aren't prone to doing that kind of feel like, I don't want to, run short on something that's essential to my family, or if I've got an event coming up or the holidays. I mean, I think we're all getting into that, that layover from that pandemic mindset sticking with us longer because of what we're seeing in some of these markets.
Well, yeah, and then, we haven't talked about the two words that everybody says now, which is supply chain. But we do have supply chain issues, and it's real. And as of yesterday, there were like 111 ships still sitting off the coast of California. And even if they can get those things delivered, there is a real shortage of truckers. I mean, there's just issue after issue after issue. So it does make you scratch your head a little bit on what planet is the Fed living on. But in the other token, they're worried about the labor market, and they should be. I just read 4.4 million more people in America quit their jobs in September, which beat the record of 3.3, I think, in August. Yeah. People just they're not going back to work. And
or not maybe not in the way that they thought they would. But by the way, supply chain issues are everywhere. When my 13-year-old son just said, "Why is everyone talking about the supply chain?" And what is that? Well, I was like, well, thank God he's paying attention, but it is absolutely everywhere, and that builds into psychology.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up your 13-year-old son, because that also has another connotation to it, is that 13-year-olds are paying attention because of social media, and kids are trading. They're trading. They're opening up accounts because they can. They can do fractional trading. They don't have to pay commission. And all of these people that, I shouldn't say all, but a lot of the people that are home now not working are trading. And it looks easy right now. Just pick a hot stock that's an emotionally traded stock, like Rivian, for example, catch the wave, and the smart people will take profits, and those that aren't so smart or hold on for dear life will wind up getting killed. But we're in this other cycle, which again reminds me so much of the beginning days when I got started in commodities. It was everybody was trading gold and silver because it was
Mm,
easy.
mm.
Just buy it, dips against you, don't worry about it, and then it just goes flying. And we're in a repeat, even more so now because the numbers have swelled in
Yeah.
terms of how many retail investors are coming into the market of all
Yeah,
ages.
right, at all ages, and we're trying to work that out, right? We're trying to work out what that looks like and what that does to what we would consider a normal cycle. A question from Kevin: how do you think gold and silver perform in deflation or crossflation?
Well, we have seen, particularly during the pandemic, we've seen deflationary times, and typically you'll see gold and silver obviously go way down as the demand starts to really slacken. But it's interesting, but one has to also remember, and I'm glad you asked that question, because what I'm going to do is pivot a little bit on that answer, because you have to remember one thing about gold. Gold is not just a hedge against inflation. Gold is a safety play in
Mm,
times of any kind of geopolitical strife. Now, we
right.
haven't really had anything much to worry about, but I did read today that Russia is starting to amass not only on the borders of Poland and Belarus, but now they're going into the Ukraine again. And if you recall, this happened a few years ago. Nothing really much came out of it. But here we are swelling into that again.
Hmm.
So even if we went into some deflationary time right now, which I don't think is going to happen, but even if we did, I would still say that gold has an interesting opportunity here because even though Bitcoin, and I'm glad so far, so I'm going to mention it before somebody asks, Bitcoin versus gold. I mean, I've never liked that conversation ever. I
Yeah.
always thought it was kind of inane to think that you could even compare the two. Bitcoin has had its run. It doesn't mean it can't go up more, and we can get back to that later. But gold has its purposes as well. And in
Hmm.
geopolitical strife, we'll see what happens. But
Yeah.
yeah, in terms of deflation, obviously, Kathy Wood keeps talking about deflation coming because of efficient technology. That would be bearish for raw materials, but I think she's 5 to 10 years out at least on terms of that prediction.
Right. And time frame matters, absolutely. And that's always important to plug into the conversation. Just want to ask you quickly about the dollar. Um, there's usually a relationship between commodities and the dollar. But is that still in place, or are we looking at a different scenario now?
Well, historically, if you really study the relationship between the dollar and commodities, there's actually really no hard and fast rule. We tend to think from logistic points that the strong dollar is going to be a negative impact to raw materials. And the
Mm,
very simple reason is that if our cost of goods are higher, then exporting those goods is tougher. That's
mm,
probably the closer relationship. But in terms of right now, the dollar going up, well, another thing I read today in Europe is this whole Brexit thing is raising its head again. I'm like, wasn't that like totally so 2016? But they're still talking about it.
because they
And
never came to an agreement.
exactly. And Ireland and the UK are fighting and blah, blah, blah,
Right.
blah, blah. And there's all these threats about trade wars going on. Anyway, the point is that's good for the dollar, obviously. Any kind of turmoil would be good for the dollar. But right now, we're not seeing that relationship between strong dollar. That means commodities are going to go down. Everything is topsy-turvy. The trade deficit widened
Yeah.
because of our exports not going up so much. And we're importing still more than we're exporting. So, all of this, you can't look at everything in the most traditional ways right now. You kind of have to follow where the momentum is. And if you're seeing the momentum in food, coffee, as we just talked about, even by the way, you asked me about some of the other metals. We're long XME. I still think that copper and steel will go up again. So that's why we bought XME to have
Mm.
exposure and also to the metal miners. All of this stuff, when you put it together, it's almost completely irrelevant what the dollar does right now. I
Yeah.
think. And besides, it's probably all manipulated anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And there are a lot of cross currents on that. Um, Mish, you talk about momentum. We have seen crazy moves again in the EV market. Tesla always, but we had Rivian IPO. That stock just continues to go up, even though there are all these skeptics. And certainly there's price action and momentum, but there's also this sort of larger umbrella of this sort of pivot that's going on. We're just coming out of COP26 in Scotland. Some surprise last minute announcement of cooperation between US and China, which no one saw coming. But we also have an enormous amount of money in the ESG market. All of this is sort of happening in the backdrop. How are you playing this? Are you in Rivian or the EV market? Or are you looking at other areas? Is there an environment or ESG play that you're keen on or you feel good about?
Well, let me just step back because you raise all great points about the EV space. One of the other things that I think people have to really be wary about is listening too much to the media. Because all we have heard throughout this whole pandemic into actually very recently is criticism of the current administration's policy on clean air and the fact that, oil is here to stay and every economy needs to depend on oil and gas for their revenue. And all of this is true. And so everybody thought that oil and gas was going to really continue to overtake the whole clean air space. And EVs, of course, Tesla was sort of the barometer here when it shot up after earnings as, wait a minute. So, you got to really watch Tesla. It's incredible as a barometer, not just for what the overall market's going to do and the EV space is going to do, but it also tells you that the mentality, regardless of what you hear talking heads say, is very much in line with transferring as much as possible within the next 3 to 10 years into more clean air. So then what happens is the market gets ahead of itself. So everybody goes, oh, wait a minute. Okay, I'm done with oil and gas. And now I'm going to look at all of this clean air. So stock ETFs like TAN have done better. PBW, which is the one that I'm very interested in. I gave you a chart on that. I have not gotten into it yet. I'm just waiting. I don't really like to necessarily go long on a Friday, especially when we've had a really good week, because then we're carrying risk unnecessarily over the weekend. But I do believe that this mentality of investors has shifted, which means that everything you just mentioned with the Rivian IPO and the climate accord and China potentially coming together. The news always comes after the technicals. And we're seeing that right now, which means once the narrative changes even in the news, other than, can you believe Rivian, it makes no cars and yet it's got a higher valuation than Ford. I think that's why I'm really excited about that whole space for 2022. And that is totally beyond the political spectrum. That's just, as an investor, where do I think we're going to make a lot of money? So I give you a chart of Blink, which is a charging station. So you got two things working for that. A, the EV thing, and B, you've got the infrastructure package, which definitely is going to help in terms of charging stations as part of it. So look at Blink. I was going to tell you all to buy it, and it comes in and goes crazy today. So this chart that you're looking at right now, it's actually trading at 40. Let me look. 40. No, it came down. It was at 39. Okay, it's come down. I would keep an eye on something like Blink. I would keep an eye on something like MP Materials. That was a SPAC back in the day that turned into Mountain Pass. Now they call it MP Materials. That thing is skyrocketed over the last few days. I think that's a stock that can go to 100. Those are rare earth minerals.
I was just going to say, I've done so much on this recently, and we had Chris Berry on, and that name rang a bell. That's what that is, right? And is it US based?
Yes, California.
Yeah. So that you also get the tailwind of wanting to bring those supply chains closer. You have the national security issue of having access to those materials within your border. So you have a lot of different issues on that one.
And that's why I'm loving this space, because you don't necessarily just have to trade Rivian, for example, or even Tesla for that matter. You can look at what goes into the whole idea of this transfer. And there's so many different opportunities as a result. So, I like to, as a commodities trader, what's the closest commodity besides lithium to the whole movement in EVs is these rare earth minerals, which are absolutely essential to have in order
Yeah.
to be able to produce all of this. So these are the kinds of things we're looking at. And then clean energy itself, like I said, I like PBW. And if you look at this, see, to me, my favorite trades, and this is something we've talked about on Real Vision over and over and over again through the years, starting with the 3D printing in 2018, is when you get a fundamental sea change shift, and then you have the technicals lining up with a really good opportunity to have a limited amount of risk with a lot of upside. To me, that's a home run.
Yeah.
And there are so many home runs right now setting up in that space, in the food commodity space, potentially, as we just talked about, in the metals, including the precious metals. And of course, in the cryptocurrency, we can talk about that again in a little bit.
Yeah.
That this is really where people have to put their minds now, not worry about the Fed so much,
Right.
and start looking for these type of opportunities.
Right. Opportunities under the theme where the growth is moving. And then you have to pay. Interesting that you're looking at both individual stocks as well as funds. That's interesting.
Well, because right, if you look at PBW and you look at the breakdown of the stocks that are in that basket, Blink is in there. But, it's still a very small part of it. So
Right.
I generally like to diversify and not get too heavy into one space. But when I see the shift, then I don't mind. So like right now, for example, we're in wheat, we're in DBA, we've been in sugar like forever. Unfortunately, coffee scared me off a little bit, but we're also in silver and we're in XME and we're in energy. And, now we're going to start buying more and more of the clean energy stocks and some of these other type of EV stocks, more relative to the support that the EVs need, because we know one thing. It's an unknown equation of whether or not they're going to be able to produce enough cars to meet the demand, number one. And number two is, obviously, we have the energy needs. It does suck energy from the earth in order to produce these cars. And number three, we have a chip shortage. We still have a chip shortage, even though semiconductors went off to new highs.
Yeah.
So that's why I like to look, maybe it's because I'm just an old style commodities trader, but that's why I look to like, what fuels this? What do we need to make this happen?
Yeah, and then you're not married to picking the one end user winner. You're just, everyone's going to need this stuff no matter how it shakes out. What do we need to understand about price action? Is there any sort of, do you have prices where you get a concern that the move is too quick? Because I think we have PBW up still on the screen. You saw that big move up and now it's come back down, but are there, even if you like this as a theme, are there price, do people have to be, pay attention to the price action and make sure they're taking profits if they're a big move, and or if they're not in it already, hold off a bit until there's moderation, or are these things just going to continue to march higher?
Well, these are great questions, Maggie, because I am not a buy and hold passive investor, no matter what, no matter how excited I am. Now, sometimes that's come back to bite me, because like, for example, I don't know, I can give you several examples of things I've gotten in at very low prices, took my profits, had my tails, got stopped out on any correction, and then just didn't bother to get back in. But for the most part, this is the way we always have been trading, and this is what I learned to do when I was back as a commodities trader, is not be a passive investor. So with that said, it's okay, because there's always different opportunities. So what you see on this chart that you put up is a monthly chart. So this is not a daily chart. The daily chart looks very different. And perhaps I apologize, I was a little remiss in not giving you a daily chart. I just didn't want to flood you with so many charts as it is. I gave you a ton of them. And the reason why I like the 80-month moving average, which you see there in the cyan line, is because that really tells you when there's a trend change on a bigger basis. So we can see that these things started to move up in 2018. We got that one dump at the end of 2018 when we had the taper tantrum. And then that turned out to be a great opportunity. And then you look, when the pandemic hit in 2020, you had another opportunity to get in. It held at the 80-monthly moving average. And we've seen this parabolic move into the peak that was at the beginning of 2021. So you can see all of these follow the market to a degree.
Yeah.
And yet now it's underperforming the market, right? Because the SPYs are at near all-time highs, as well as the NASDAQ, the diamonds, and the Russells. So that tells me that you have to pick a level of risk.
Yes.
and look at different time frames. So I would not just look at the PBW chart on a monthly. I just wanted to show you that we have had this correction.
Trend, right?
Yeah. But if you look at the daily chart, we're sitting right now at what we call a 6-month calendar range high, which is at around 95. So it's trading, that was yesterday's price was 95.14. I think today's price, we're somewhat right around there. That tells me right now, if we continue to hold this 95 level and we can take out 95, 95.50, and again, I'm hoping it doesn't happen today on a Friday. I hope it gives us an opportunity on Monday. Now you know you've got that, you can see over the last few months how that 70 level is held. Well, I wouldn't necessarily risk that far unless I was really more thinking that this has got a huge potential in 2022, which it does. I would be more looking at the daily chart and saying, well, gee, at this point now, if it clears these levels, it's really going to have to hold more like around 89, 90. So now I'm taking a $5, $6 risk so that if it goes up over 100, and keeps going, I can take a little bit off the table and then let it fly and keep raising my stop. That's how we do it.
Yeah. It's important to go through that too, because I think we often get questions about how do you make a decision? How do you decide when to cover? How do you decide when to buy more? How do you decide when to, take some profit? So it's incredibly important and appreciated for you to sort of walk us through the thinking, because I think it's instructive for people. And we are maybe in an environment where even if people were more passive, you have a feeling it's not going to be that easy going forward with everything going up. So you're going to, even those who are maybe, put it off to the side and don't look at it that often, I think we're all going to have to be a little bit more vigilant. I don't know if you look at this, Mish. I'm just going to ask, we do have a question about carbon credits. Is that something you look at all? Do you think carbon credits will be a commodity?
Well, by the way, if you look at just the whole carbon space, talk about a parabolic move. Oh my God. I mean, I think it's CRBN. I'm not sure if that's the symbol. I just looked at it the other day because one of my members asked me about it, and I was like, whoa, I wish you would have asked me about that a couple of months ago. Yeah, I mean, yeah, why not? Absolutely. I mean, this is, it's a commodity. So there you go. I think it's very possible. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a market that's going to develop a lot more too, when we're talking about that growth in ESG. Just want to ask you, we're going to hop to crypto in a minute, but I just want to ask you first, you have some other really interesting things that you're looking at. So I think we the EV, especially with all the attention around Tesla and some of the infrastructures, but you're looking at other sort of interesting areas of the market, bio-based plastics and ag tech. Walk us through a little bit about that. They sound so interesting to me, and maybe something that's not on everyone's radar.
Right. Well, I was reading about Toys Go Green, and I thought that was kind of such a great catchy phrase, that essentially what a lot of toy makers are doing now with the whole sustainability movement, that's only going to improve over time as well.
Just let me jump in. I think if we could get, I think AVTXF, if we could get that up before we go to the ag stuff. Yeah, I think we have the ag one up first. But I think I want to talk about plastics for a second. So go ahead, Mish.
Did I give you that chart of AVT?
I don't know. Maybe you didn't. If not, we'll leave this one up.
I think I just mentioned it because the chart.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
okay,
it's actually not.
We'll talk ag in a minute.
It's not doing much. That's why I didn't give you a chart.
So, but anyway,
it's something to watch. It's something to watch, but it's not doing anything yet. What is more interesting right now is what's going on with. Okay, so here's again. I mean, this is not rocket science. You just have to think logically here. So if food is going to get really expensive and we're dependent on Mother Nature, and we know that's definitely a wild card, and on top of that, we got the supply chain and yada, 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 and all the things we've talked about that we don't have to repeat. What's the next logical thing? Companies are going to be sitting back and going, gee, especially tech companies, and there's so much innovation out there. What can we do so that this is not a crisis down the road? And again, I bring up Kathy Wood because she's thinking like this already. So she's certainly right, but we're traders. We're not going to sit there and buy on the way down, hoping that in 5 years these things go up. But that's not what we're going to do. But she's right in a certain degree, so I always watch things. So App Harvest is probably right now the premier company in terms of vertical farming. So it's indoors, and they have these levels. The only problem with AppHarvest right now is, at least the last I read about, is they were really just doing tomatoes. But the idea is that the vertical farming, they're seeing it already in the cannabis space. AgriFi, I don't know if I gave you that chart, but AgriFi is a very similar vertical farming. They reported well and the stock sold off, but that's another one to watch. This whole idea of vertical farming is the future, no doubt.
Yeah.
And then if you look at Origin, which is seed, they're doing basically really trying to recreate seeds in a laboratory. And again, it's a Chinese company, so it went down a lot, not because it's not a popular idea, but because it was a China company and everybody got really nervous about Xi and out of control regulations that he was doing all over the place. But nonetheless, now all of a sudden it's popped over the last couple of days.
Yeah.
So if the inflation narrative is such that we're worried about food prices getting to a point now where people are really going to be hurt, and of course we always know who gets hurt the worst in inflation environments is the people with the lowest amounts of income, then these companies are going to get busy trying to figure out how to make things cheaper. So that's why the opportunity could be coming up for these companies too. And we saw it in AppHarvest and Seed starting yesterday with some follow through today.
Yeah. And by the way, you want to buy low, right? So when you see a chart that looks terrible, that's interesting because you have a lot of upside to potentially capture. And I just want to bring it back to the trillions of dollars of investment money that is in the ESG market and the number of funds that now have ESG mandates in where they're putting their money and investment dollars. And that's only going to, that capital is going to find a way to companies that are solving those kinds of problems. And the numbers, by the way, PIMCO has some great numbers on the stats around the ESG market right now are phenomenal. It's phenomenal. So to me, that's another positive on the backdrop for some of the trends that you're talking about. I want to jump over to cryptocurrency because this has come up a lot and you touched on it earlier, on whether this is an inflation hedge, right? Should we be thinking about this if inflation is now with us for the foreseeable future? You said you don't like that pairing, but talk to me a little bit about where you are with crypto.
Well, we know that crypto was, I got so much flack from people on Twitter and also during interviews about how, I was still saying, don't take your eyes off of gold. No, gold's dead, it's dead, dead, dead. And it's all going to be about Bitcoin because Bitcoin is the ultimate hedge against inflation. But Bitcoin has actually fallen off from the highs again. It also has a relationship to the dollar in fiat currency. So there's two ways to look at the whole idea of the Bitcoin space, and then we can look at the whole cryptocurrency space, because Bitcoin is still obviously the granddaddy of the altcoins, but not the end-all be-all anymore. But I'll get back to that. So in terms of Bitcoin right now, what we really have to look at is the whole idea of the cryptocurrency is here to stay. It's gone more and more and more and more mainstream. But there's a little teeny bit in this infrastructure package, by the way, that talks about regulation. And that is something that could wind up happening, at least with Bitcoin. But there's no way that the SEC is going to be able to regulate all of the different coins that keep emerging. So in terms of the cryptocurrency space, you look at Bitcoin, obviously, again, as a barometer, kind of like we would look at Tesla as a barometer for the EV space. But at the same token, what we're seeing now is a lot of rotation into some of the other coins like Polkadot and Solana. And so with cryptocurrencies, we've been watching these now, obviously since 2017, but we just came out with our own quantitative model called the Crypto Pulse, just hot off the press today. And if I may be a little bit self-promotional for a moment, the thing is that what we're doing is we're doing large cap coins, crypto coins. And we're doing it on the basis of our proprietary indicators of not only trend strength indicator, but also risk management, which for us is always the most important part of any trade, is the risk management. And as a result, the numbers have been incredible. Our two biggest positions now are in Polkadot and Solana and not in Bitcoin, and they're up tremendously. So that's the self-promotional part. But the bigger point is that really this highly emotionally charged cryptocurrency space
Yeah.
has a thread of technical analysis, and that's really basically what we're trying to capitalize on. And I'm having a lot of fun. I'm trading some of these other coins that are really small relative in price, but yet go up 100, 200, 300% if you catch them, and there's still a technical element. So
That's so
cryptocurrency.
interesting. So I know last time we spoke, we talked about some of the things that you like, and I knew that you were building out a team. So did you want to bring some sort of discipline in terms of the way you think about this? Because I think certainly the thing that scares off some of us, and I've talked to some really veteran traders here on Real Vision who are just like, listen, I'm really enthusiastic about the underlying technology. I just can't price these things. Like the price action just doesn't. It's hard for me to wrap my head around that. And that's where they get a little bit, I don't want to say skeptical, but a little bit more kind of concerned. So does your technical analysis sort of lay on crypto, or do you have to build something completely different for this product that you're launching?
No, it lays on it. And actually for veteran trade, this is great for new traders who've never traded any cryptocurrency in their lives. And
Which is a
veterans,
lot of people.
a
Which
lot of
is a
people,
lot of people.
exactly. This is still a 5-year-old thing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a baby. It's a baby at this point, which makes it so exciting. And of course, blockchain technology, which we haven't even discussed yet, is also the future, as we know. I mean, even the
Yes.
new mayor of New York is talking about making New York more involved with blockchain technology. It was sort of a publicity stunt to take his first 3 months pay in
Yeah, or 3 weeks or
cryptocurrency.
3 months. Hey,
Yeah,
New York City mayor and Miami mayor. But I
yeah.
think more importantly than the salary is they're trying to make, much like Wyoming has successfully done, the cities a hub for innovation in this space. And I would say probably more in the broad DeFi space rather than just crypto. But that they see it as a new growth industry.
So what you
Rightly
just
so,
put
I
up
think.
yeah, okay, so good. So let's get back to, so what you just put up is our ranking of the top 10 coins right now. So you can see Solana is number 1, then Litecoin, Polkadot, Ethereum, Chainlink is there as number 6. Bitcoin is number 7, interestingly enough,
Oh.
Dogecoin. And then Cardano is wrapping up the list at number 10. So yes, this is the best technical way to get involved with the coins based on a system that at this point, back tested from 2017, is up 62,000%.
I'm sorry, what?
Right? What? Yeah, but it's true.
62,000%. That's probably, I'm laughing because it's just such a shocking number, but I'm sure anyone who's in this space is not surprised at all, especially
Exactly.
if they're, if they got in early.
Yeah, and I know Holden, who works with us, told me the number before of how much that has outperformed the actual Bitcoin itself, but I can't remember the number right now off the top of my
So
head.
this is your basket that you've.
This is our basket right now, exactly. So you can see that LTC Litecoin just moved into number 2 spot, but yeah, this is our, the TSI, that's our proprietary indicator, and this is as of the close, I think either yesterday or 2 days ago. I'm not 100% sure, but nonetheless, the point is that we have quantitative models that trade pretty much everything. We have global sectors, and we have what we call an alpha rotation, which really deals mostly with you're either in bonds, cash, SPY, NASDAQ, that kind of thing. So that's a big macro thing. And then we have ones for country ETFs. And then we have one for sectors, which right now, getting into clean energy, speaking of clean energy. And then we have one for the NASDAQ All-Star, so the top 5 NASDAQ stocks. So, like, for example, we were in Moderna for ages. So here's the point is and NVIDIA, by the way. So the point is that this technical analysis with these quantitative models, putting this together with crypto is extremely exciting, because the big thing is this: you learn about position sizing, you learn about risk management, and at the same token, you also we give alerts for all of this, by the way, so you don't really have to think, you just have to execute. And then we give you the profit parameters as well. So for us, this has been, we've been already doing it in our funds. Like I said, we just launched the product yesterday, and we're really excited about it because it's fun. Now, eventually we'll get into a more sister product that will talk about and trade stocks and ETFs that have exposure to the crypto space. So companies like Bitfarms, which is a mining company, which we've been in, Hut being another one, or Riot or Marathon, these kinds of things. Those will eventually be all put into a system as well. But for now, this is a really good way to get started trading with the crypto situation, especially if you are worried about the risk in any kind of downturn. We've got that all priced in.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And it's Crypto Pulse Quant. Is that what you're calling it?
Yeah, and if you go to our website at marketgauge.com, it should be right there up on the home page.
Okay,
way
great.
to learn. Yeah.
Great. Well, it's certainly going to help me, Mish. We have a question. How will crypto perform in deflation? Do we know that yet? I mean, it's so new. I mean,
Well, let's see. Let's go back to 2017. Well, there wasn't all these coins back then, right?
Right.
We're talking about
And
Bitcoin.
it's a big question because crypto, I don't even know if we can at some point put them all together, right? Like it may not be.
Right. I love the question though, and here's why. Okay. In my modern family, we know I've had the traditional sectors, the Russell 2000, retail, biotechnology, semiconductors, transportation, regional banks. I think I mentioned all 6. I added cryptocurrency as the newest member to my economic modern family. And what's so interesting to me right now is we're still in discovery of how cryptocurrency and the economy are related to one another. Yeah. We don't know yet. So that is such a great question. And certainly if anybody has any thoughts about it, I would love for them to be shared. What we do know right now is, yes, people were looking at it as an inflationary hedge. People are looking at it as the potential for the new world reserve currency and getting rid of fiat money. Not going to happen yet, but could happen at some point. Certainly started a chain of digital currencies coming out of different countries. People are using their Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies now to put it back into dollars and buy stuff. That's really what you want to see. Once it becomes more part of a consumer economy, then yes, it could actually be exposed to inflationary, deflationary times. But at this point, there's no hard evidence of that because it's so new.
Yeah, we just don't have a track record. But you're right. Fantastic question. That's going to be so interesting to see how those relationships develop and whether it changes or to what extent it will change some of the traditional models that we've had, because it is a new phenomenon. Have to, since we're going into the brave new world, have to ask you about the metaverse and not Meta, who thinks that obviously is staking a claim to try to own that. But I think this is another area where people are, trying to figure out, is there a trade? Certainly seems a longer term horizon, but are you looking at that space? Is there a way to play what a lot of people think is going to be, huge potential growth there?
Well, so Metaverse this is like the 2017 in Bitcoin that we have right now in Metaverse, right? This is brand new, hot off the press. I mean, this is what makes everything about trading so exciting, is these emerging technologies and these emerging trends that a lot of older folks are going to have real trouble wrapping their head around. Why are non-fungible tokens valuable? You can't get them. You can't hang them on your wall. I mean, I don't get it. And when I've thought a lot about it, and partly I'm very, you have young kids, so that helps. When you have young people around, they explain this stuff to you.
Yeah.
So.
And why it will work, even if you can't get your head around it.
So, so let's just go to NFTs for a second, because some people think that that's going to explode even more than cryptocurrency. And I've had to think, like, why? Well, the whole idea of value has changed. The whole idea of value has changed. What is exactly? We know Bitcoin is a store of value, but a lot of these other coins, not necessarily, right? And certainly fiat currency, is got its own situation because it's so movable and manipulated. But in terms of, let's go to NFTs, the whole idea here of what's happening is this next big movement is that value is in the eye of the beholder, basically. I mean, that's really what this is all about. And it doesn't have to be something that you can actually pick up or drink like your coffee. And so now the metaverse, though, is a little bit more fungible because basically it's taking the idea of virtual reality and yet it's merging it with 3D. So you can actually become, through the virtual reality, a 3D image of yourself or something else. And that's how you can actually communicate. That's what Facebook's vision is all
Yeah.
about.
Do you
Not
think
just Facebook.
Facebook, I mean, obviously with the name change, but do you like Facebook on that trend?
Well, eventually, yes. But right now, I don't even think it's the most exciting thing. I think Roblox is actually a lot more exciting because I think the first real use of metaverse technology is going to be in the gaming space. And
Mm.
so that's what Roblox does. So
What
Roblox,
kind of price action are you looking there? Because it's been moving around lately.
well, it
I think
just
it just got
reported
killed, didn't
earnings.
it, on
No,
earnings?
the opposite. It reported
Okay.
earnings and it flew.
Okay. I knew it went one way. I couldn't remember. I don't have it up in front of me.
And we actually are in it for our fund ahead of earnings because
Hmm.
we kind of had this feeling that this thing could really blow up. I mean, the whole gaming space got killed because of China, because they put all
Hmm.
those restrictions
Right.
on how many hours kids can be in front of a video game. And that kind of brought things down. But as we've seen, China puts a kibosh on something and it becomes a great buy opportunity. Kind of like what happened with cryptocurrency when they stopped the
Yeah.
mining. It became, for us, a great buy opportunity once the dust settled. So the same thing here with the gaming thing. So with Roblox, you have twofold. You have the idea that they're going into gaming metaverse type situation where you're literally going to be able to play in the 3D kind of space. And by the way, I'm no expert on this. I'm just learning about it myself.
Yeah.
At the same time, like Nike is talking about going metaverse. So what that means is that you can literally take merchandise and put it on an image to see what it looks like. That's
Yeah.
kind of my rough explanation. And please, if somebody knows a lot more, correct me because,
Well,
I'm
and by the
certainly.
way, well, I'm sure in our audience they do, but also for anyone who is looking at this space, we have tons of stuff on the Real Vision Crypto channel, and it's free to everyone. So, we know that Raul and Ash, and they're talking about this all the time with some people who are really, really on the front edge of this. So I encourage everyone to go check that out. But
So let's make it simple, concrete. So let's continue to talk about Roblox
yeah.
because we don't have to worry about every single company or stock that's going to get into the metaverse space that's going to benefit from it. We started out talking about Facebook, and Facebook obviously is something to watch. They're looking at it more in terms of the social media, so that's a little far out, and they're also looking to hire about 10,000 engineers to make this happen. So probably now, but they also have a lot of the virtual technology. So does Microsoft, by the way, and Google. So these are the companies to look at. Well, but what I loved about Roblox is kind of it was like the Rivian story.
Yeah.
It's a company that wasn't really all that well known. You'd see people tweeting about it occasionally here and there.
Right.
And it wasn't even a company that I was paying attention to as a typical gaming company. But when I heard Metaverse, I got interested. So after it reported, it needed to clear 90 and it gapped over that and it traded up to like 120 or close. And it's been consolidating now between 95 and now I think last I looked today it was like 104. So to me, you have 90 as a great wall of support now. So
Hmm.
who knows? We're in uncharted territory. I mean, that's the
Right.
other thing that's really exciting is when you get into an uncharted territory, you still use your smart trading sense to take profits, to raise stops, to try to protect what you already have. But at the same time, you have to keep something on for the more parabolic potential,
Yeah.
which I think it right now actually still has. So we'll see
Yeah.
what happens if it can get through the high from post earnings day.
Interesting. I love it. Mitch, we haven't had a chance to talk about this, but emerging markets. We've been talking to people who are feeling like we've seen such a huge move in U.S. equities, in some of these individual stocks, and people, for whatever reason, feel like once we start to get into 2022, they're either cautious, expect more volatility, things are going to get choppy, and often that can hit emerging markets. How are you feeling about this space? Is this an area that you like? Is this an area you think is going to be difficult or dangerous? What are you looking at?
Well, certainly globally, they've been much more, recently anyway, impacted by COVID than the United States is at this point. I mean, the United States is an unbelievably advantageous country because we've had the vaccine rollout, and now we have the freedom to have anti-vaxxers and questions about the mandate. But if you look outside of the United States, they're having some real issues. I mean, Germany's having issues again, China, the
Yeah,
UK.
it's
And
incredible. Just when we think the news flow has changed, I just saw that this morning, cases going up in different spots.
exactly. And even here, I mean, I'm not that I think anybody is really terribly worried about it, except for obviously people who would have serious immune issues. But even people who are double vaxxed, the breakout cases have risen
Yeah.
too. So, but let's forget about the United States for a second, since we're talking about emerging markets. So what that tells me is that, it's kind of like long ago when I went to London, I met with a bunch of friends who were commodities traders there, and they said, London is really still several years behind the United States in terms of even women's rights, for example, was one of the things we were talking about, or women opportunities. And so when you think about it that way, if they're really behind us, if we look at COVID in and of itself, it means that at some point, either the vaccines will become more available, or it'll just, feed on itself and become just another virus like the flu or what have you. At some point, we know the cycle will end, okay? So there's a tremendous opportunity there once Europe comes back. The United States has come back. Even some of these restaurant stocks that I really wanted to trade, and I now regret that I didn't, like sushi. Oh God, was it Kura Sushi? If you looked at that stock today, the thing freaking rocketed after it reported earnings. So these sort of going back to eat and play and theaters and travel. We know now
Tourism.
that tourism, Europe is going to get there. They're just a little behind the time. And so that's why I actually think emerging markets could be interesting for next year. You just have to be careful what you choose. Some of the countries like Brazil and Latin America are doing better because of their commodity exposure.
Yeah.
But I've been really interested in Greece. I've been interested in Greece. Well, last year and 2 years ago on Real Vision, we talked about Vietnam. That thing went crazy.
Yeah.
So now I'm looking at, okay, what's next on my radar? And I'm looking at Greece. Because
Why
Greece,
that's so interesting, because they were maybe one of the hardest hit in the financial crisis. I mean, it was just I was just doing an event with Ava Kalali, who is looking at Bitcoin and those trends for the European Parliament, and she's originally from Greece. And one of the things that sparked her interest in all of that new technology is just the pain that they suffered during that time. It was just so hard hit. What about Greece makes you interested in it?
well, partly because of that, because they were so hard hit. We actually started buying GREK at $7, and we got out at like 14 or what. And I haven't really looked at it much. So lately now it's going super sideways. Greece. And did I give you a Greece chart, by the way? Did I give you, Greg, by
I'm
any
not
chance?
sure if we have that.
I might have forgotten. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's
Well,
okay.
right now, if you look at the chart,
If we have one, it's 2022 EEM, I think.
oh, that would be EM. Okay, so that wouldn't just be Greece. But let's put that up, and then I'll talk about Greece in a moment. Okay, so this looks very different than the Greece chart, because right now you can see that 80 monthly again. And we took that out again in 2017, kind of the same cycle, got hit with COVID, and now has come back. And what I like is, if you look at the whole emerging market space, if you don't want to look at any particular country, if you actually looked at the peak in 2018 and you move that line over horizontally, you can see that's been a big area of support since the end of 2020, throughout the entire 2021 so far. That comes in somewhere around 48, 49. So 48, 49 to me has really been now the area that the emerging market ETF is holding. And it actually almost looks like it's getting ready not only to go up, but it looks like it could be flagging to go higher. So if you didn't want to forget about the Greece conversation and you just wanted to look at emerging markets, unless we break down under that 48, 49 level, I think that there's an opportunity there because it's so underperformed the United States. That's one of the big reasons, and has the opportunity to come back. We've already come back. Look what's happening to us. We've come back, but we still have all the labor problems and everything else.
Yeah.
So,
and what about Greece? I'm really interested in that. Is it that we're going to be so desperate for for travel and because they're very reliant on tourism, aren't they?
Exactly, and that's one of the big things that I like about it is that they went through hell and back, but they got saved by the EU when they needed it before they went in total default. They've had all the riots, they've had, COVID. They're kind of on the other side of it. So I just find it interesting. I mean, some of it is just gut feel. I'll be 100% honest. But I would never trade off of just gut feel. What I like now is how it's holding the actual GREK between 2750, which is where the 200-day moving average is, and the 2820 level, which is where the 50-day moving average is. So it's kind of hovering between a warning phase and a bullish phase. It's going up and down, up and down, up and down. And I think if it can really hold here above this 28 level, if you look at the chart, it actually is just cleared the 80 monthly. So it's been underperforming the rest of the emerging market space. Well, underperforming. Yeah, I've always rooted for the underdog. That's just that's just me.
Well,
so
I can tell you anecdotally, for anyone scrolling on Instagram, somebody's all those influencers are working for the Greek tourism company and getting our appetite up because that's all that pops up on the feeds, which is sort of interesting as well. Mish, we have a question coming in, and it kind of brings us a little bit back to agriculture and it's not agriculture directly, but the food space. This is from Jason. Do you still believe in BYND long term?
I'm so happy you asked me that question.
Beyond Meat, for those of you who may not be in that.
My worst trade this year was probing Beyond Meat 3 times. But that's okay, because one of my best trades a couple of years ago was getting into Beyond Meat and riding that.
Still right.
Yes, I'm still ahead. Okay, so I look at it that way. My members may not agree with me on that one, but that's okay. Well, so a couple of things is I saw a very, very famous trader, so I'm not going to say who it is because I don't certainly ever like to talk anything about anybody because everybody's got entitled to their opinions about things. Mm-hmm. But the whole plant-based phase of eating is over. Just give me a good piece of steak. And I think that's just ridiculous. I'm sorry. I mean, forget about the fact that I'm vegan, because I've been vegan for like 30 years, and that's for more of I had major health problems. But I see Burger King. I actually went and got an Impossible Burger at Burger King for the first time in my life. I went to a fast food restaurant, really, except when I was a kid. And you know what? Not bad. McDonald's experimenting with Beyond Meat now to see if it hits for some of their breakfast sausage sandwiches, doing it with a Beyond sausage instead. Sustainability, consciousness of the younger generations, plant-based eating. And they just did a whole comparison of being a plant-based eater versus being an animal product eater, and it actually saves money. Now, that's not very well known because people think, it's going to cost me more money. But I think they did all these food comparisons, and it was like an average of about $23 a week less to be on a plant-based diet. So from a fundamental standpoint, I don't think it's dead. And I talk to people who are carnivores who say, you know what, I'm making a chili con carne. I'm doing it with Beyond Meat instead. Because there's a health consciousness there as well. And we've become a much more health conscious country, even though we still have probably one of the largest obesity rates. And coming out of COVID, that actually got worse, which could be a plus for plant-based diets. So looking at the chart, it just reported earnings. It had a real downgrade. It had a few downgrades. And people think the stock is dead. But I remember going on this show a couple of years ago when it was trading about $75 to $78. And that's when we got interested It just went down yesterday. I think it's like 76 and change. So I'm keeping my eye on it. I was tempted to just jump in at like 76, 77, but I didn't. I'm going to wait. But I don't think it's dead at all.
I
I
think
just
it's
think,
at 84. I think I see it at 84. It's down
oh,
32% on the year, but I think it's at 84 right now. It's up on the day, I think.
oh, is it? Because when I looked at it earlier, it
I
was,
don't know. I
yes,
think so.
you're
Unless,
absolutely right.
yeah, it's up to 2 3/4 today.
I,
Um,
I I probably would have bought it. I still think, I think you have a good idea. If it breaks 74, you're gone. I mean, that's it.
uh,
74 would be my place where, okay, maybe it can go to 50, and I don't
uh-huh.
want to sit through that. But right now, 74, and maybe even the new one will be 76 to 77 wall of support. I don't know if I necessarily jump into it right now as we're talking, and I kind of missed it, obviously, because we're talking, but nonetheless,
Sorry.
that's okay. But if it's a good opportunity, it'll be a good opportunity. And I think the more people talk it down, the more interested I get, because they're wrong. It is a mega trend. Plant-based diet is a mega trend, but these mega trends go up and down, as we know,
Yeah.
like exactly where we started, talking about clean air, mega
Right.
trend.
Right. It is. And you'll look at the space because as it picks up and becomes mainstream, does it get competition? Maybe, but these are the things that you'll have to follow. But you want to keep an eye on the big overarching theme. And then of course, your risk, your needs, and then some of the more short-term price actions, which you did a fabulous job of covering both of them for us today, Mish. And it was really nice to be able to take a look at some of the broader trends and then dive a little deeper into some of the individuals and stock action. So thank you for that, because I think as people, especially as we come into the end of the year, and if people are sitting on big gains and they're wondering if they want to readjust and they want to look for other names, they want to take some profits, they want to kind of reposition themselves for the new year, I think that's where you start, right? With some of the bigger themes that you believe in. That's what I do anyway. I try to look at that, and then you want to dig in underneath that and then see what's attractive. So I loved the conversation today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maggie. It was such a
And then
pleasure.
congrats on the new crypto product. I think that's going to be fantastic. And next time you'll come back and tell us what you're seeing and the insights that you're teasing out for that. And again, if you want more information on Crypto Pulse Quant from Mish, that you can go to their main page or just hit up Mish directly and she'll get back to you with more information. Mish, thanks so much, and we'll see you again.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your year. Happy holidays.
Yes, that's right. And again, in case you didn't get your questions in, or if you have some follow-ups, you're watching this after the fact, you can always drop them on the exchange. Mish is fantastic about following up and trying to get back to all of you. So go ahead and do that. And we appreciate the fact that she does that for us. I'll be back at 4 p.m. Eastern today for the daily briefing. In the meantime, take care and good luck out there.